the Next Generation of Philanthropy. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the Fundraising School, and I'm delighted to welcome back to our podcast my colleague, Dr. Una Osili. Una is the Associate Dean for Research at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, which is home to the Fundraising School. She's also one of the top 20 leaders in the philanthropic sector. And Una, what a delight to welcome you back to the Fundraising School's First Day podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be with all of you today.
And a new study, hot off the press, the Next Generation of Philanthropy, looking at Millennials and Gen Z. And before we get into some of the findings, Una, which are absolutely fascinating and are going to inform the field of fundraising, let me just ask somewhat facetiously, why do we even study the Millennials and the Gen Z? Everyone knows the boomers have all of the money and are doing all the donating. Oh no, why are we studying Millennials and Gen Z?
I would say very simply, this is the future of giving. These are your pipeline, your future donors. And also, they are your, what would I say? They're part of your landscape. The charitable giving landscape is certainly much broader than the boomers, and also includes Gen Xers, the millennials, and the Gen Zs. It is not just the money, as we all know. It's also about the talent and the testimony and the time, but also the future giving. It's not just current giving, it's future giving.
You know, Una, I also think it's part of the mindset of fundraisers. I know as we get older, it's so easy for us. You know, we meet somebody when they're, say, 10 or 12 or 14 years old, and we have that image in our minds. And then, you know, we meet them 4 or 5 years later at the family reunion or some such thing. You're like, oh, wait, you're not 14 anymore. You're 19. Look at you all grown up as a young adult now, right? And our oldest millennials are now in their 40s. Our oldest Gen Zs are approaching the age of 30. If you look at Twenge's research, she talks about the millennial generation, many of them actually doing better than their parents and grandparents at similar ages, financially and economically. Our colleague Michael Moody says the millennials are going to be the wealthiest generation ever because of their own wealth creation and because of what they stand to inherit from their parents and their grandparents. And the Giving Institute shows that millennials have now passed their parents in Gen X in terms of average household giving. And so these generations matter just because they're wonderful human beings, and we need to pay attention to all generations, but the data are pointing us in that direction. And so, Una, as you did this study, what are some of their top areas of interest philanthropically?
Very good question. Well, let me just start by saying that in addition to studying how they give, we also looked at their motivations for giving and what's important to them. So I want to start off by saying that in terms of what's important to them, that causes matter to millennials and Gen Zs more than organizations. And this is a departure from what we've seen in the past. When we looked at older generations, they tended to support the same institutions year after year or have an affinity to certain types of charitable organizations. We look at our millennials and Gen Zs, there is actually a shift where they care about the causes and then look for the organizations that align with those causes, whether that's education, healthcare, climate, equity, any of those topics. They are kind of starting with the causes and working backwards. Having said that, we do note that the top 2 areas of giving for even these younger generations actually look quite similar to the older generations. In particular, basic needs is something that cuts across all generations. We see whether it's the older households or the younger households, basic needs is important. And also that religious giving, although it is lower than it has been in the past, is a priority for these younger donors. So if we just confine ourselves to number 1 and 2, we see some consistent patterns. However, one area that has fallen lower in the rankings is education. Younger donors, particularly the millennials and Gen Zs, rank giving to education much lower than their parents and their grandparents.
And so Una already has given us a takeaway here that you're not asking for financial support for your organization. You're asking for charitable gifts for the causes that you are addressing. And Una, when I saw the report, starting with those top 2, religion and basic needs, you know, we read in the national news and other research, you know, the millennials and the Gen Zs are less likely to go to religious service, regardless of the religious faith. They're less likely to be participating in various congregations. Was that a surprise to you to see religion at the top of the list alongside basic needs?
Well, I think we need to put this in context. As you know, here at the school, we've been studying giving over time using the philanthropy panel study, and we have seen a decline in giving to religious causes across the board. But when we look at just rankings of top causes, I think it's encouraging to see some of the consistency. So in other words, although we're seeing these younger generations giving very differently, motivations different, and also how they're approaching their giving with technology playing a big role. Those are different. There's actually some consistency in the sense that they are supporting some of the same causes that their parents and grandparents.
And I've also seen some other commentary that if in the area of religion and basic needs, they may not be giving to the place of worship, but they are willing to give to the faith-based provider of basic needs, the faith-based homeless shelter, food pantry, and so forth. Also, some other top topics, environment and social justice. Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, so giving to the environment is certainly something we have seen really gain a lot of ground over the past decade. When we look at overall from our Giving USA data, also the philanthropy panel study, more Americans are giving to support the environment. That includes, of course, giving to the environment includes animals as well. For millennials and Gen Zs, that is a particular area of interest. They are very passionate about giving to the environment. That includes a wide range, whether that's climate, whether that's supporting conservation efforts, whether that's supporting animal shelters. That covers a lot of ground. But over time, that's actually one of the differences we see, that younger Americans are much more likely to give to environmental causes, and that they also give larger amounts. So those are two takeaways from the research.
And those folks who are focusing on environment see that as a social justice issue, but there's also social justice more broadly defined. What did this study reveal for us?
Yes. And when we talk about causes and values, we know that these younger generation of donors care about social justice in a broad sense. And that means really looking at where there has been opportunity to make a difference, whether that's around policy, whether that's around helping particular people or communities. The idea of social justice essentially addressing needs, especially among historically underrepresented groups, is something that really resonates with that group. When we say social justice, you can see that cuts across a number of traditional ways of defining the charitable sector, whether that's giving to in a way that supports healthcare, the environment, a range of other causes, basic needs. So a big takeaway for me is as the nonprofit sector seeks to engage this younger group of donors, really understanding their motivations, meeting them where they are. And when we talk about social justice, it may sound quite difficult to implement, but really thinking about how your organization is addressing a need, and especially one that has not been met in the past. And that's really what the social justice umbrella covers, putting it in very simple terms.
And in terms of addressing those motivations, I'd like to ask you to go back. You mentioned early in our conversation here, perhaps less interest, comparatively so, to older generations for education. And the study also said for the arts. Can you tell us more about those areas, please?
So let's start with education. One of the, I'd say, concerns for me coming from the study is that education, when we look at the data, has resonated, especially for older generations. Many boomers and older, they gave to their higher education institutions, their alma maters. They also sought to support other types of educational causes. Over the past decade or so, we've seen giving to education actually, especially among everyday households, decline slightly. And when we look more closely at that data, we see that it's the younger households. There are many reasons for this. Some of the top reasons are around engagement. What are colleges, universities, educational institutions doing to engage this younger group of donors? But there's also a bigger issue around trust. In the past few years, we've seen declining trust in institutions, and higher education has been adversely impacted by this. Other explanations, especially when you look at more of the qualitative data, you find that many younger donors are not necessarily seeing education as a place where they can invest their philanthropic dollars, simply because many of them are tackling education debt from schooling, and also not necessarily having awareness about the role that philanthropy plays in maintaining high quality in higher educational institutions. So there's a lot of work to do to change this narrative. And here, I think one of the challenges has been higher education has actually focused more on their current donors, meaning their older alumni, and perhaps not built those on-ramps and engagement opportunities for their youngest donors. And I think that is really an opportunity and hopefully a call to action coming out of the study.
And again, helping the millennial and Gen Z folks see, don't be giving, don't ask them to give to that institution like Una has told us. Show them what education means and the causes it addresses when we have more education, more equitably across our society, and also what the philanthropy means, how that makes a difference to address those causes. And Una, I think about our colleagues in the arts. I mean, every time we do a study, it seems like arts is the one that's taking it in the shins the most. And our friends in the arts, like, I'm standing right here, here we go again, arts. What does the survey tell us about these generations and their support or not for the arts?
So, very good question. Well, here is the big picture. What we've seen with giving to the arts is that the arts sector has been particularly hard hit during periods of downturn, where what most people, what we've seen in the data during the Great Recession is that many households moved their support to basic needs away from the arts and seeing that perhaps as more discretionary as far as their giving is concerned. However, we've also seen during COVID that the arts sector has been a source of innovation in communities. And so I think part of what needs to change in order to connect with these younger donors is to help them see how arts and culture are fueling community, building community, reaching underserved communities. There's a lot of room there to build support. So while the arts seems to be adversely impacted by business cycles in particular, where during times of adverse economic conditions, people tend to pull back their support from the arts, there's also a broader economic argument to make for giving to the arts sector in terms of how it supports other parts of our community and reaches other parts of our community. So I think as I reflect on those findings, a lot of that may just simply be the fact that the arts subsector has been, I'd say, one of those that we do see during downturns, people reduce their support. We've had a lot of economic factors at work here in the last few years, especially as it relates to these younger donors.
And for fundraisers in the arts, perhaps we can synthesize these findings. We know, and you know in the arts better than we do, how the arts touch our hearts and can be provocative to move us into positive action in areas like social justice and meeting basic needs. And we know this throughout history, how the arts uniquely can do that. So maybe you can synthesize some of these findings as you reach out to the younger generations. And Una, a last category of findings from the study, and again, you alluded to this at the start of our conversation, is that for Gen Z and millennials, the giving of money, even the volunteering of time, are not their only definitions of philanthropy. They have these other activities and behaviors in their lives that they consider to be philanthropic. Can you help us understand those findings, please?
Well, absolutely. I would say one of the takeaways from this study is that when we look at that youngest cohort of donors, they have a much broader, more expansive definition of giving. They include certainly giving of their time, their talent, their treasure, but they also add buying socially and conscious goods, purchasing certain kinds of commodities, actions that they take, even advocacy related work. So we are looking at, as we said, it's not just the 3 T's anymore, time, talent, and treasure, but it's this broader notion of ties, networks, testimony, using your voice and platform. And increasingly for this generation, it's also their purchases, the idea of socially conscious consumerism, or even their actions that they take. So as we work with this youngest group of donors, I think my highlight and takeaway is that we need to meet them where they are and really think about how we can harness all of the different assets that they're bringing to the table. And we have a lot to learn from this youngest group of donors. Certainly, a lot of our organizations can learn from them.
And where they are is on social media. And this study finds that social media is central to the philanthropic behavior of these 2 generations. And the way they go to social media for entertainment and for social interaction also can drive their philanthropic behaviors and decision-making. In fact, and I saw another report that said if a millennial or Gen Z learns about a cause, maybe even a nonprofit, they'll check in with their social media circles to see if anybody else is involved. That's yet another example of how influential social media is to these youngest generations.
Yes, this is our first group of Americans that have grown up in this era of Instagram and Twitter, or Blue Sky, or any number of social media platforms. And whether it's they're learning about the causes on social media, they're giving on social media, but they're also sharing on social media. So when they make donations or volunteer or even advocate for a cause, they're going on social media to do this. So what does this mean in terms of how nonprofits need to adapt? I think once again, it's making sure that our organizations, our causes are optimized for that type of engagement, and that we can really leverage and benefit from the activity that's taking place online.
Dr. Una Osili is the Associate Dean of Research. She also leads international programs and our study of diversity in philanthropy at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. Una, you're the best. Thanks for being back with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
It's such a pleasure to join you. Thank you so much.
And again, the study, The Next Generation of Philanthropy, here's where you find that study on website, go.iu.edu, and then go across the toolbar and you'll see a tab that says Research. Hit the pull-down menu, go to Latest Research, and that's where you will find this study, which is informing the curriculum at the Fundraising School. 25 public courses, in person and online, leading to 5 different certificates, including our new certificate on planned gift fundraising. We also can customize training just for you. We can bring a course to you or put some pieces of courses together that is customized just for your nonprofit. We have our quarterly webinars and these weekly podcasts, and all of our information gathered in our textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, the book now out in its 5th edition. That website is the same, go.iu.edu. And for the Fundraising School, put a / and a TFRS. I'm grateful today for our producers, Jennifer Boffman, CFRM, and our Emmy Award winner, Mike Anthony. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.